With the first edition of Black Saturday in the books, aka Week 6, Week 7 shows up to be a really interesting week as well, with some major national championship and playoff implications possibly being settled in some games, as well as possibly being Black Saturday Part 2. See who could be on upset alert and who's currently on upset alert on this edition of Gridiron Gab Triple Option. Welcome back, you gabbers. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on this late evening. And it'll possibly be early afternoon when I get to you. Of course, this is Mr. CeeLo coming at you. And of course, you guys know I got to give a lot of love to my buddy Brad, who's out there. I'm currently up very late Saturday morning. And I am shooting this episode. I'm running behind as usual, guys. It's really tough trying to do it when you're working a full-time job, so on and so forth. But I'm actually up checking out the Utah-Arizona State game. And Utah is trailing. Something about these Friday night games, you guys. You know, these Friday night games are a nightmare for ranked teams. It's been so many upsets. I mean, if you're a ranked team, you got to be telling ESPN, look, man, hey, we don't want to be on TV. It's got to be something that you got to say, look, if you know you're going to be ranked, you got to tell them. But we've got some serious major fights that are going, that are really going to come out. And needless to say, this is going to be one of those weeks that could very well decide who gets in the college football playoff and who gets those really big important spots. But as we look around and get ready to go through week number 7, and we ask the question, could this be Black Saturday all over? Or Black Saturday deja vu? That's what we're here to answer. And we're going to start with number 23 Illinois versus unranked Purdue. Now, I'm going to say it just like this. Illinois has been very impressive this season. I have enjoyed watching this football team grow. I've enjoyed watching them do their thing. You know, Purdue's 1-4, so this could be a relatively easy game at Memorial Stadium in Champaign. But this is where things get interesting when you're facing a team that has got that number out beside it. It has the ability to draw some comparisons to some of the upsets we had last week, and one that we're currently looking at now. And I don't see Illinois having much of any issue. I think they win this game running away. You know, the spread's got 23.5. I think they cover that rather easily at home. I'm not going to say they're going to pull what Notre Dame did, but they'll probably cover 24 points. So I'm going to take Illinois. I don't see Illinois having much trouble in this game. And then moving on to number 22 Pittsburgh, who just got in the top 25 versus California. Now, this game could be tricky, because I don't see Pittsburgh having the offensive firepower that Miami had. And as everyone knows, California came out last week and really, really gave that game to Miami. Now, I'm not saying my man Cam Ward and those guys didn't come back and make a huge push to make this game interesting. But, however, I am going to tell you that I am not sold on the fact that this Pittsburgh team is that much, even on the same level as one Miami Hurricanes. So, I will say that I believe that Pittsburgh has got a defense. They're going to play good defense. That's what they do. They're going to play really good defense and force you to do things. But I think Holstein has been a really good quarterback. He's been one of the few quarterbacks that you've seen at Pittsburgh in the last probably 10 to 15 years that has these kind of numbers through 5 games and has Pitt undefeated. 113 for 172, 1,564 yards, 15 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And honestly, you can't forget about Reed, the running back. But then, Mumpfield has been one of his go-to guys. 23 grabs, 426 yards, 3 touchdown grabs. But this is why I say you've got to look out for California, because Mendoza had a game of his life. Now, I will say this. I think that California was playing on straight fumes. And the reason why I say that is they were playing at Berkeley last week. And the reality of it is, and Arizona State just pulled off a major upset of number 16 Utah to go to 5-1. So, guys, I can tell you, Arizona State's more than likely going to be in the top 25. I'm sorry I had to cut that out. But they beat Utah with Cam Rising, even though this was Cam Rising's first game back. But Utah's now dropped 2, and they're probably officially out of this thing. They'd be fortunate if they're in the top 25. But number 16 Utah falls tonight to Arizona State. Just a footnote. But back to business. I could see Mendoza and California making this game a lot closer. If California's defense can play like they did against Miami for the first, I would say, 55 minutes, they got a great chance of winning this game, although it is at Pittsburgh. But, as I said, Pittsburgh's always got a really good front. So if California can protect Mendoza, and Mendoza can make the same number of plays he made against Miami, and Pittsburgh does turn the ball over, this could be big. Now, I'm going to say, guys, don't be surprised that about 6 o'clock you look up and California's winning this game. Number 21, Missouri against UMass. At UMass. Now, Missouri got spanked last week. And if you're UMass, you should have called and got a reprieve and said, next. This ain't what you wanted. This would have been a game that you wanted if Missouri beat Texas A&M, because they could have been drunk, or, what I mean is, not that drunk, but, the kind of drunk where you're victory drunk. We just got through with a huge win, and you have that hangover. That huge hangover. And my manners, y'all. I went the whole show and then give a gab out to my buddy Brad. He also commented saying that Syracuse's coach is a dog coach. That's why they're playing so good. What? No. They've been 6-0 at one point, so no. But anyway, Missouri should have no problem with UMass, and they are going to come out and they're going to handle business to the full extent. They might play their starters all the way up to the middle of the fourth quarter. Number 18, Kansas State at Colorado. Now, here's where Coach Prime gets to show that he can do something besides talk. Now, am I sold on Kansas State in this game? I don't know yet. And I'm still really not sold on Kansas State being a ranked team. That is my huge issue with this football team. Kansas State has not shown me that they have the ability to really put something out there. This is gonna be one where the Kansas State Wildcats have a chance to put their money where their mouth is, especially with Coach Dion in their 4-1, 2-0 in conference play, where you've got Johnson, who's got only 879 yards passing, 9 touchdowns. But then you got Giddens, who's got 604 yards on the ground, 2 scores. This is where You look at shades of that TCU game last year. If Kansas State is able to move the football on the ground, this could be a very, very long game for Shedeur Sanders, Deion Sanders, and the Colorado Buffaloes, because you could see shades of TCU running amok again. Up and down the field running the football, and if you keep getting those big guys pushing you around, it's going to be a long day. And then Shedeur Sanders is arguably one of the top quarterbacks in the country. 138 for 197, 1,630 yards, 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. The other issue is Colorado has a terrible, terrible running game. They have non-existent running game. And the reality of it is what's going to happen, if Kansas State can come up with some exotic blitzes and get to Shedeur, this could be a really long game for the Colorado Buffaloes. But as is, do I think this game could be competitive? Especially with it being in Boulder, yeah. But I think what happens is Kansas State wears down that Colorado defense and they keep Shedeur at bay off the field. And this is going to be I don't want to say a blowout, but it's going to approach one. And Kansas State wins this game. Then you got number 17, Boise State at Hawaii. I mean, here's the thing. It's not even... A lot of people are going to say, oh, no, not another one of those graveyard games. Yes, another one of those graveyard games that is probably not going to get a whole lot of attention. It's going to be at 11 o'clock. My only question is, he's got 1,031 rushing yards, 16 touchdowns. He's already broke 1,000 yards. We're not even halfway through the season. This is a guy that can rush for 2,000 yards and probably steal the Heisman. Then we're looking at BYU at Arizona. Now, this game may not look like much to many of you. Now, and I'm just going to kind of breeze by it a little bit because, listen, this is a game that has all the makings of a lot of fun. BYU is 14th ranked BYU, I might add. BYU is undefeated. Arizona is unranked and 3-2, as Fafita has finally got his feet under him. He is now 100. He's completed 110 passes out of 179, 1,361 yards, 7 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Not what you expected coming into the season with a guy who was arguably on the Heisman watch list. And it seems as though if they've gotten things together. But you can't ignore Retzlaff, the quarterback for BYU, who's 90 of 147, 1,208 yards, 12 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. But they play a really aggressive style of defense, and this game's going to be a really interesting game to see if Fafita can get this team back to where even myself, thought Arizona was going to be a contender. And since losing early on in the season, they've come back and they've gotten hot. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch BYU's defense try to go out and get Fafita. And it's going to be interesting to see what kind of adjustments Arizona's defense makes for BYU's offense. As we know, BYU's defense likes to create turnovers. So it's going to be interesting to see if Arizona can go and take that undefeated record away from BYU, or if BYU continues to move up. This one's one I'm torn on, but I'm going to go with BYU because they are at home. If this game would have been at the Wildcats' house, I would have taken them. But it's hard to win in somebody else's building, even as a venue that is not nearly as loud as BYU's. Now, looking at number 11 Iowa State against unranked West Virginia. Now, West Virginia has been a team that has made some noise the last couple of weeks with some impressive wins of their own. They're 3-2. And number 11 Iowa State is trying to get to 6-0 for the first time since 1938. So there've been a couple of times in the last couple of years they've been 5-0, and they haven't broke the 6-0 streak. But you're talking about going into Morgantown. That ain't no easy feat to go in and beat the Mountaineers in Morgantown. It's going to be a really, really tough game and an interesting game. This is one that I'm going to be looking at. And I know you guys, I asked at the beginning for a reason. Could this be Black Saturday? Deja vu or two. Rick Beck is 87 for 132, 1,170. That is a pretty darn impressive completion percentage. 9 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And you've got Green on the opposite side. He's 72 out of 126 for 1061, 7 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. Neither one of these teams really stick out as far as their players go. Now, Noel for Iowa State, it really does. He's 24 receptions, 451 yards, 2 scores. This guy is the big play guy in that Iowa State offense. And the reality of it is if West Virginia, in that style of defense they play, they lose this guy, he could burn you. He can hurt you. Now, this is one of those games that if West Virginia can control the pace and get the ball in the hands of Donaldson, let him control the pace with the running game. Remember what we said last week was the formula, you guys. Win the turnover battle, win the time of possession. Because I'm going to tell you, Vanderbilt won that thing running away, and it was still a one-possession game. I'm thinking West Virginia's going to have to control the clock by about 15 minutes, and 15 minutes more than Iowa State. Let me make sure I clarify for those that are out there trying to question it. They're going to have to win this battle by at least 15 minutes. So that means they're going to have the ball about roughly 38, 37 minutes. So, this is going to be a tough ask. They're going to have to control that ball because the reality of it is you don't want to give Iowa State too many opportunities. I'm not saying they've got a high-powered offense, but they like to take the shots when they can. However, as much as I want to say Iowa State's going to go 6-0, my gut is telling me West Virginia's going to pull the upset. So, yeah, that's where I'm at with that. Then we've got number 11 Notre Dame hosting unranked Stanford. Now, I know a lot of you guys that are history buffs when it comes to college football. Remember when Notre Dame was upset by Stanford in Notre Dame Stadium in South Bend. But I think Notre Dame is pretty much aware of what Stanford did to them 2 years ago. They're not going to let this just walk down because the Irish were looking at a bid in the college football playoff, and the Stanford Cardinal punished them for it, for looking past them. But as I said, I don't see a lot of threats when I look at the Stanford Cardinal. This looks like a team that is just completely overmatched. They do have injuries, however, that being Notre Dame with Boubacar Traore going on injured, having surgery on his ACL this week. And you've got guys like Jordan Batella, who's also who's had a season-ending injury. So the Irish trying to suck it up as far as the injuries go. The injury bug has hit them pretty hard, especially on their offensive line. But I see Notre Dame taking this game. They are not going to let this team walk past them. Even though they do have a tough look-ahead game with Georgia Tech next week, I don't see them looking past it. Number 10, Clemson against Wake Forest. Now, Wake Forest is the surprise of the year, in my opinion. I don't think anybody coming in saw Wake Forest having this type of season. I think a lot of people saw Wake Forest possibly bouncing back. We knew Wake Forest was in trouble last year after you saw the transfer of Sam Hartman, and it really did stick, but Wake Forest did have some positive moments. But the thing about Wake Forest is they have a history of pulling upsets against Clemson and Florida State. Whereas you're looking at the 2-3 Wake Forest Demon Deacons and you say, uh-oh, If you're Clemson, that is. Clemson's been on a 4-game winning streak since getting walloped by Georgia. And this is a game that could very well work against Dabo Swinney and his boys. But I can honestly say Dabo Swinney made sure he let his boys know and reminded them of Black Saturday. You don't want to be on Black Saturday deuce. So, needless to say, he basically told his 10th ranked Tigers to stay focused. Well, we've heard one story about a coach telling his boys to stay focused, and it cost him. But I'll take Clemson in this one. Don't be surprised if we look up about 3:30, and the Demon Deacons are giving them a fit. One of the main big shootouts, we'll get into that later. Number 8, Tennessee versus Florida in Knoxville. I don't even need to say anything. Tennessee. Then we got Alabama hosting number 7, Alabama hosting South Carolina. You should have won that game last week, South Carolina. This is going to be a drubbing. It's going to be a straight drubbing. Alabama's going to be pissed, and they're going to take it out on you. Number 5, Georgia versus unranked Mississippi State. This is another one where Georgia is possibly going to put the smack down here, but I will say this is what makes college football week to week such a journey. You have to not take any of the weeks for granted, because the reality of it is you could find yourselves on the opposite end of an upset bid. Now, Georgia, you got to think, there could be trouble here, even though it's in Athens. The problem with this is they've got to go to Austin next week. So this could be one of those games. Then they've got Florida, and then they've got at Ole Miss, and then they've got really the rest of the meat of their schedule. So after this week, you really get into the meat and potatoes of your schedule if you're Georgia. And the reality of it is, this could be a much more competitive game than people are willing to give Mississippi State credit for. You got number 4 Penn State against USC. Yeah! Now, a lot of people are going to say this game doesn't mean much because of what happened last week. I beg to differ. USC is not going to be a happy camper losing that game to, and this is the problem I have with the system. I really have a huge problem. I get it, USC is a 2-loss team now, but the truth of the matter is you lost on the road. I mean, to me, a loss to an unranked team on the road is not nearly as embarrassing as getting beat by an unranked team in your own building. Ole Miss. But here's the recipe in the whole chili. What has to happen in this game is, and I'm gonna be honest with you, this is the worst case scenario for Penn State, being that USC had lost this game, because now their crowd is gonna be raucous. They're gonna be wanting to out there, and they're gonna be ready to put that first L Duncan right there in front of Penn State. What the? L as in L Duncan, her bit. Anyway, the reality of this is that USC is a very, very tough opponent in the Coliseum. And I don't know if Penn State's got enough on offense. I mean, Penn State I like Franklin. I think he's a good coach, but they've just had problems at that quarterback position in the big games. I mean, look, you got Drew Aller. Seems like he's been playing quarterback there forever. He's 73 of 103. Impressive, but he's got 1,101 yards and 9 scores. We all know Singleton is what makes that offense go. 408 carries, 3 scores. But then you look at Marks on the other side, 468 yards, 4 scores. But then you look at Moss. These are the numbers you want to see. Completion percentage could be better, but he's got almost 1,400 yards passing. And then that receiving core is lights out. And listen, the ESPN analytics have USC pulling the upset. I'm inclined to agree.
What a dumbass!
It's going to be Black Saturday for Penn State. And now we get to the big matchups. There's going to be 3 major ranked Dukums. The first one is going to be in Death Valley. Now, we're going to have 2 of these going on, but I'm going to be honest with you. The one that I'm going to be interested to watch is going to be the next one that we're going to talk about. But number 9, Ole Miss is overrated. I'm not sold on Ole Miss. I think LSU wins this game, and I think it's going to be one of those games that LSU walks away with. Because we already know Brian Kelly has already said earlier in this year he had, I don't want to call it a meltdown, but the reality of it is that Brian Kelly was really not happy with this defense. Was not happy with the way they performed, how they just allowed points in long, big plays when they know what they were up against. And see, LSU is going to come in with I would say a bigger game plan. I would say a huge game plan because if I recall correctly, they were off last week. And see, they've had 2 weeks to prepare. Meanwhile, they've had to face off against South Carolina, which was an impressive win. But the reality of it is I'm not sold on them. I think LSU comes out and they are able to put pressure on Ole Miss's offensive line, which is what we've seen. I think they improved a little bit, but I think, you're looking at Lane Kiffin's inability to really get his team to understand how important protection is and how important the other side of the football. Now, the defense is okay. It's not horrible, but I think right now Brian Kelly's figured it out. I think he's figured out how to get to his players. I think he's figured out what to say, and I think he's figured out how to redirect them and get them to refocus. And I think that's the most important part. But then you're talking about Nussmeier for LSU. He's throwing for almost 1,700 yards. Now, everybody's going to say Jackson Dart's throwing for 2,113 and 2. But I'm looking at who he's played. And that's just like we're sitting here looking at the ESPN analytics. I don't see Ole Miss beating LSU. Not in Death Valley, I don't. I mean, you can take them if you want to. To me, I'm going with LSU. I mean, they got the line at 3.5. I'm taking them 3 points because LSU's going to win this game outright. And the reason being is, as we look at these numbers, they're inflated. They're an inflated bunch of numbers. These guys ain't doing this against quality competition. This is why they struggled in that game against Kentucky. They were fortunate that they were able to handle South Carolina because South Carolina's offense looked lost. This offense ain't going to be lost. This is a team that's been battle tested, and they're going to prove it. And as I said, I'm going to take LSU, and I'm going to tell you, I think Nussmeier throws for 300 plus, maybe more. And I think Jackson Dart has another one of those games he had at Kentucky because LSU's going to get after him. And get after him they will. And get to him. Let us look at the nightcap. Another one of those nightcaps. Ohio State versus Oregon. Don't this feel like a college football semifinal game?
Yeah.
Don't it, though? This one's going to take place in the Autzen Zoo up in Eugene. Now, if it's one thing that I know about, now a lot of people will say, well, they've had people in the Pac-12 beat them in their building. That's the Pac-12. You got a Big 12 powerhouse walking into the Autzen Zoo, a team that has not experienced this. I recall correctly, Michigan State went up there years ago. Oregon's always been a team that has traveled far and wide to face off with many of the top programs in the country in their building. They've gone to do the visiting, whether it be SEC, Big 10, Big 12, you name it, they've gone. And it's great to finally see a powerhouse come there. In Ohio State, who's 5-0 and ranked number 2. Oregon ranked number 3, 5-0. I think Oregon's ranked a little high. So, but this is where we have. You've got the ESPN predictor saying that Ohio State's a 2-1 favorite to win this game. I'm not sold on Will Howard, you guys, because the whole basis of Ohio State's offense is predicated on whether the quarterback can get the ball down the field. Will Howard's completed 93 passes for 1248, 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Then you've got Dylan Gabriel, who's thrown 167 passes and completed 130 of them. He's completed the same number of passes than Will Howard's attempted. But the only other thing about that is he's only thrown for 1449. That means he's throwing a lot of short stuff, but it is a lot of completion. So that's a good thing if you're looking at this Oregon offense. But then you look at James, who is the leading rusher on Oregon. Now Oregon tries to distribute the football in several different ways. And then you got Johnson, who's got 43 grabs on the year, 395 yards, 5 touchdowns. But that's part of the whole system that Oregon runs. They like to throw a lot of bubble screens or slip screens and whatnot. So, yeah, that's where a lot of this comes from. But then to me, what really makes this interesting is you look at the games by committee and you see what these teams have done. Now, Oregon actually hosted Michigan State. Ohio State went to Michigan State and actually ran the dog on them. Now, I will say this, the only game that really battle-tested Ohio State is going to be that Iowa game. But then you back up and you look at the Oregon schedule where they face Boise State, and that was a 3-point win. So I think a lot of what people are not looking at is how good Boise State is. And Oregon was able to get that win at the blue turf.
Stop the cap.
So when I'm sizing up this game, I think a lot of it's going to do with whether or not Oregon can spread out Ohio State and win the line of scrimmage. Because ultimately, Will Howard's going to be the factor for whether or not Ohio State can do what they need to do. And honestly, like I said, Oregon's done a great job taking care of home. And Dan Lanning's tenure, he's been very good at home. I don't think he's lost but one game. I think he's only lost one game since he's been, don't quote me on that. But Oregon's been very good, as we know from last year. You know, they've pretty much handled home field. You don't walk into the Autzen Zoo and get them in that building. So with that being said, I think they pull an upset, and they won't take over number 1. Nobody's going to take number 1 from Texas for the rest of the year unless there's a massive, massive upset. This is 3 versus 2. I don't think they shoot Ohio. I don't think they're going to shoot Oregon over number 1 Texas. Texas has got their own noise they can make coming up. They've got number 18 Oklahoma in the Red River Rivalry. Try saying that real fast. Red River Rivalry. I call it the Red River Shootout like they used to years ago. I don't know why they went back to it, but I love the Red River Shootout. I think this has always been one of those football games where whichever team had the ball last was going to win it. And Texas has got to be... This is not a game you want to be in if you're Brent Venables. This is not the game you want to be in, with it being one of those games you need to get. Because you need to stay in the college football. In order for you to stay in the college football playoff, you got to win this one. I don't see it happening. I think they get their second loss, and they don't necessarily fall out of the playoff contention. But I mean, they fall out of the top. I think they fall out of the top 25. I don't think there's any way of getting around it. The only way is unless Texas is able to pull it off right there at the end and everybody's like, nah, we only drop them a couple of spots. You know, that's only decent. But I don't think Oklahoma can keep it that close. I don't think they're going to turn the ball over like that. I don't think there's going to be an issue with what was going to go down. I think ultimately, Quentin Ewers is going to come and get back to what he's doing. I think they bring him back slowly, but I think ultimately what happens is they're able to run the football, establish the run, and they're able to do some different things because these guys in Oklahoma showed that they had a lot of problems with Iamaleava. They had a lot of problems with him, and not saying he's not great, but I mean when you see a team that has trouble with pinpoint accurate quarterbacks, that's usually not a good sign. And I know I didn't stay on this game a lot. I just think that ultimately Brent Venables is going to have to come up with a lot of different schemes, and he's going to have to cover well. He's going to have to bring a lot of guys to the line of scrimmage and confuse Quinn Ewers and make him make decisions that he necessarily doesn't want to make, and make him decide, I'm going to do this as opposed to doing what I want to do. Give him different looks. That is the only way I can see Oklahoma pulling the upset, because Texas doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And honestly, I'm really starting to like Steve Sarkisian's method of coaching. You would have never thought he could get to this point, given some of the things that happened to him out there at Washington. So it's good to see him recovering from that pause in his coaching career and being able to break a program of prominence back like Texas, which was in the dumps for the longest time. But as I said, I see Texas winning the Red River rivalry and Red River shootout. And it's even got a sponsor now, the Allstate Red River rivalry, or the Red River shootout. But I see Texas maintaining that number one position. And the question is, does Oklahoma make it competitive? That's the question. But guys, let me know what you think. That is the rundown for week number 7. Will it become Black Saturday deja vu? Or will it become just one of those games that separates the top teams from the bottom teams? But until the next time, same Gab channel, same Gab platform.